to our world. I'm Stephen Walker. One mother is sharing a heartfelt message with the LGBTQ plus community. Last spring, her 33-year-old son, John Umberger, was found dead in a Manhattan townhouse after spending time at several gay bars in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood. His death was originally ruled an accident. His mother knew that just didn't seem right. I sat down with John's mother, Linda, to talk about the life of her son, the mystery surrounding his death, and her mission to prove it was not an accident. Thank you, Linda, for joining me today. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. And if you don't mind, could you take me back to when and what convinced you that John's death was not an accident or suicide?
Well, thank you for having me on and for your condolences very much, especially as we come upon a year since John's death, which brings back a lot of memories because it was the whole thing of John being missing, and yet his phone indicated that he was still using it, but no one could reach him. So that was sort of a first sign before we even knew John was dead that something was off. And so each day passes. It began Saturday, May 28th, but then we see that John is active. We see he's reading our text messages, but we're not getting any response. Then we go to Instagram and Facebook, and it appears that he's active, yet he's not posting anything. And John was fairly prolific on social media, and we were expecting these great posts from his time in New York City for Memorial Day weekend, and we got nothing. So as time keeps going, no one hears. That was a sign that something wasn't quite right. But then Monday, Memorial Day weekend, or Memorial Day, and we still haven't heard from him, and he wasn't showing up for friends. Alarm bells started going off, and yet the final straw was his not showing up for dinner for people that he had scheduled a week ago on Tuesday in DC, and the fact that his car was still parked in Union Station. So we started reaching out to his employer, different people. Where is John? Where is John? Nobody knew. And I called NYPD and said I wanted to report a missing person. And they said, you can't do that. You have to do that where the person resides. So they offered, which I was very grateful for, to do something called a well check, where you call the police and they will go to the last address of where the person was staying, as well as check hospital records and jail records. And so we began that, and then they went to the residence where John was staying related to his work. And there was a lot of back and forth, but then finally I did receive a call from John's employer, his boss, saying that, horrible news that John's body had been found. And
I'm so sorry. It's a mother's worst nightmare. I really, really, really do feel for you. It's heartbreaking just hearing this story.
And so that was you're right, that was the worst news ever. But then we go to New York to claim John's body, and it was presented to me as if John sat on the bed to tie his shoes and just fell over and died. And that did not make sense. John was only 33. So that was the first thing that didn't make any sense. And then in further conversations with the police and starting to ask, where's his wallet? Where's his phone? The phone was the most important thing, and his phone was not on him. And then after pushing them, NYPD finally said, well, we did find a wallet. Well, was it empty or what was in it? And they finally said nothing was in it. So that Wednesday, June 1st, we began tracking credit card movements and discovered within the next 24 hours that the last cab ride John had ordered, he never got in. So that was yet one more thing that didn't make sense. So when the police wanted to present to us that John must have gone out and partied because it was at the queue where the last cab ride was ordered, and someone robbed him at the club, and he just was so depressed and came home and did a bunch of drugs and overdosed, that was like, John, that's not how my boy would have ever responded if something like that had happened. So it forced us to do our own detective work, including going to the precinct, refusing to leave until we sat down with the two assigned sort of burglary detectives to present to them our timeline to say this is not an overdose. This is something much more sinister, because by then we had discovered how the credit cards had been maxed out. His bank account had been emptied and everything else. And so it was just a process of putting the pieces to the puzzle together. And it was a team effort.
Thank goodness he had you. Not everyone has a family willing to fight, or, with the savvy to do this. And it's now been confirmed by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office that the death not only of your son, but also Julio Ramirez, a 25-year-old social worker, was in fact felicitated deaths, drug-felicitated deaths. It's happened to someone else.
Oh, it's happened to more than Julio and John. It's happened to Lady Gaga stylist Katie Gallagher. It's happened to countless other people, and it has forced the medical examiner to review cases that she had previously listed as drug overdoses, but had what's called the grand larceny component of the phone being missing and the credit cards and bank accounts being maxed out or emptied, and to identify those as homicides, because I believe the number is much greater. And it wasn't only the ring that was responsible for John and Julio's death. There are several other rings doing the same thing, including in July, Katie Gallagher, who was Lady Gaga's stylist, through the same method. So it's very alarming that this is going on.
We're going into Pride Month. And is there anything you'd like to say as a mother, to our community, going to Pride celebrations, about safety and just common sense?
First of all, I'd like to say that your community has contributed so much. When I look at what John did, no straight man could have ever done and accomplished what John did. And I applaud you, and I am so grateful to you all, because you have endured so much. And yet this is yet one more example of people taking advantage of the vulnerability within this community. So I want to say thank you. You are a blessing. Please stick together and be safe and look after one another. Don't go out on your own. And as exciting as it is, and we all think, we are friends with strangers on social media, but the old truth that our grandparents and great-grandparents, for your case, taught us of don't talk to strangers, sadly still holds true, even, may I say it, in a sexual context, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual or whatever. There's still laws of the universe that sadly exist, that if you want to be safe, I would say to anyone, do not go out with strangers. Don't go out by yourself. Have an accountability mechanism and have a great time and celebrate.
Thank you for joining us for Our World, for content that advocates for you. Go to advocatechannel.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. For the Advocate Channel, I'm Stephen Walker.